As Mark mentioned, I'm the spiritual leader of Chokhmat Halev, a Jewish renewal community based in Berkeley, California, for embodied prayer and mindfulness, sharing of mystical wisdom, and open-hearted connection in community. Invite any of you who are either live in the Bay Area or visiting to come check us out. Our full schedule of prayer services and events, you can check our website, and all of our prayer services on Friday night and Shabbat morning are Zoomed and live streamed, so you can always join us virtually. And particularly wanted to invite you this Sunday night. We're going to be hosting New York Times columnist Ezra Klein on the topic of Shabbat and the art of rest. And so a topic which is probably near and dear to many people in this group. And so would love to have you join us either in person or virtually over Zoom. You can get all that information on our website, chokhmat.org. So let's settle in for our meditation today. And for kavanah and intention, I'd like to turn to this week's Torah portion, which is the where we begin the book of Vayikra. We just finished the book of Shemot, of Exodus, where we focused on the building of the Mishkan, which is the earthly dwelling place, the sanctuary that we've built for the divine. And so now, as we enter the book of Vayikra, now that we have a sanctuary, a place for the divine to dwell amongst us, we learn how to start connecting with this divine spirit, with this divine energy. And the very first word of the book of Vayikra has a teaching for us on how to do this. And the word is Vayikra, which is where we get the name of the book and the Torah portion from. And Vayikra means, and the divine called to Moses. But what's interesting is that in the Torah scroll, the word Vayikra is written with a small aleph. And the Jewish commentaries offer a wide range of explanations for why there's a small aleph, small typeset aleph in the Torah scroll. Rashi, the medieval French Torah scholar, he points out that without the aleph, the word would read Vayiker, which draws from the root kuf resh he, those three Hebrew letters, which means it happened, like the word mikra, a happening, rather than kuf resh aleph, which is being called. So that aleph actually significantly alters the meaning of the word. And the Jewish mystics teach that the letter aleph, which represents the number one, is actually one of the names of the divine, alufo shel olam, the cosmic oneness. And so perhaps there's a teaching here in this word Vayikra that the way we can hear the voice of the divine is looking more deeply at the things all around us that just seem to be happening. Instead of just seeing these things as happening or just as coincidences, which would be Vayiker, instead we can insert that aleph and perhaps see even mundane day-to-day tasks as an encounter with the divine. You know, one of my favorite teachings about the Aleph comes from Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Rimanov, the Rimanover Rebbe, who was one of the leading Hasidic masters in Galicia in eastern Poland, western Ukraine in the late 1700s. And the Rimanover Rebbe, he teaches us that at Mount Sinai, we didn't actually hear the 10 commandments. And he argues that we didn't even hear the first 2 commandments, as it might seem from the text in the Torah. In fact, he argues we didn't hear anything except the first letter of the first word of the 10 commandments, which is the letter Aleph. And Gershon Shalom, who is one of the great scholars of Jewish mysticism, he refers to this Aleph at the beginning of the 10 Commandments as the quote unquote, the pregnant Aleph. And I just want to read a little description from Gershon Shalom. He says, in Hebrew, the consonant Aleph represents nothing more than the position taken by the larynx when a word begins with a vowel. To hear the Aleph is to hear next to nothing. It is the preparation for all audible language, pregnant with infinite meaning. So perhaps it's this aleph, this barely audible sound that represents the still small voice, the cold mama daka of the one, of that cosmic oneness. And perhaps by making the aleph small in the first word of this week's Torah portion, already a letter that is so faint, that's so hard to hear, we're taught that in order to hear the kol koreh, the divine voice that is calling out to us, we have to quiet all the chatter around us and all the chatter within us so that we can hear it. And perhaps that revelation that began at Sinai continues in every moment of our lives if we clear the space to listen to it. So let us quiet our minds. Let's put aside our to-do lists, our buzzing notifications, even just for 10, 15 minutes this morning. And let's sit together in silence and see if we can hear the faintest whisper of the divine Aleph calling to each of us. I'll keep time and bring us out of our meditation sit together in about 10 or 15 minutes. As we slowly come out of our meditation sit this morning, we return to that first verse of this week's Torah portion, Vayikra el Moshe. And it called to Moshe, to Moses. And we can assume from the context that this is the divine calling out to Moshe. But the verse doesn't actually say who is doing the calling and where is the calling come from. And so the mystics teach that actually what this is here to invite us in to realize that we don't actually know where the divine voice is going to come to us from, when, or even who. And thus, every interaction that we have, every experience that we have during our day has the potential to be an encounter with the divine. And that small aleph at the end of Vayikra is a reminder of the cosmic oneness, that we are all one, that we are all connected, and that the divine flows through all beings. And so my blessing to all of us today is that we have the wisdom and the strength to approach each moment of our day as an opportunity for an encounter with the divine, and that our mindfulness practice is not just limited to our 15, 20 minutes of sitting together this morning, but that we bring that mindfulness to every moment of our day, and that we see each moment as an opportunity to connect with that inner stillness so that we can hear that kol dmama daka, that small, faint voice that is calling out to us from the divine. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Zvika. Beautiful teaching. And friends, we seal the practice as we do each day by offering those of you who are in mourning or observing a yard site at this time, or if it's your custom to join in the Mourner's Kaddish, to do so. You put the name or names of those you're honoring today in the chat box now, if you'd like, or after reciting Kaddish. For those who aren't reciting Kaddish, you're invited just to stay present and offer your love and support, create a minyan of comfort and support for those who are grieving right now. And thanks to Kat for sharing the words of the Kaddish on the screen. If you're reciting it, I invite you to join me now by rising in body or in spirit. And you can unmute at this time. Yitgadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah, V'yama Divra Chirutei, V'yamlich Malchutei, V'chayechon, V'yamechon, V'chayei Dechol Beit Yisrael, V'agalah V'zman Kariv, V'imru, Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah V'barach, V'alamu Lamei Amaya. Yitbrach, Yishtabach, Ha'ar, Yitramam, Yitnaseh, Adar, Yitalev, Yitalal, Shemei, Dekudsha, Brichu, La'ela, Minkol, Birachata, B'shirata, Tushbechata, B'nefalata, Ha'amiran Ba'ama, Mimru, Amen. Yehi, Shlama Rabba, Min Shemaya, V'chaim, Aleinu, V'yakol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen. Says Shalom Bimramav,
Shalom
says
Bimramav,
Shalom
Shalom
Aleinu,
Aleinu
V'yakol
V'yakol
Yisrael,
Yisrael,
V'yakol Yoshvei Tevel, V'imru,
V'imru.
Amen.
Amen.
Friends, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to thank our teacher for today, Zvika Krieger, of spiritual leader of Chochmat Halev. Putting the link again to Chochmat Halev's general website. Also a link here to the conversation that Zvika mentioned that he's having, I guess this Sunday the 26th, 7:30 Pacific time, which sounds fascinating. We're interested in speaking about that in a moment. Of course, everyone is invited to stay on you can use the time, next 15 minutes or so, just to stay with your practice, continue sitting with us and use the container. If it's helpful for you, you can even turn off your volume and just use this time to continue to sit in silence with us. If you'd like to share reflections on your experience with the practice, you can do so in the chat if you wish. And if you have a question about the teaching or a question about the practice, please drop that in the chat, and I'll keep an eye on that to integrate it into the conversation with Zvika. And as always, thanking Kat Esposito for holding our space. Just a reminder for those of you who are leaving us, we'll be meeting the next couple of days, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Tomorrow will be led by Rabbi Deborah Ornstein, Thursday by Rabbi Jenny Solomon, and on Friday, instead of Rebecca Schisler leading us as usual to sit into Shabbat together, since it's Rosh Chodesh Nisan on Thursday, we will greet the new month of Nisan with Sarah Waxman of At the Well, who'll be leading our practice on Friday. So very much looking forward to all of that. And of course, to next week's week-long series, A Soulful Seat at the Table for a Mindful Passover with Rabbi Miriam Margles. So just going to invite you in, Zvika. Here we are. Thanks. It's just amazing how much can be done with that little aleph, which is, there are so many directions to go. And I really appreciated what you said, and also noteworthy that aleph is the name of the umbrella organization for Jewish renewal practice and the ordination program that you're in right now. So I want to just share before we get into it. Just going to share so that people can actually see what it looks like here. In that first word of this Sefer, this book of the Torah, there it is, the little aleph, the reduced aleph that Zvika was referring to. You know what I was really struck by, Zvika, was when do you have that quote by Gershom Scholem handy that you
Yeah,
included?
I'll put it in the chat here.
I don't think I ever noticed this, but it's interesting because whenever I refer to this, in the aleph and that teaching, that the only thing that, that we heard at Sinai was the sound of the aleph, usually take that as silent, aleph is a silent letter. But Gershom Scholem kind of points out that it's not quite totally silent. I think you said, there's a word there that I don't remember. Oh, there it is. It's next to nothing. It's not nothing. It's next to nothing. I just wanted to ask you about that, whether you think there's something that we can learn from, if that is true, because I think the aleph, at least originally, kind of had a kind of guttural sound, right? It's a consonant. It's not a vowel. Kind of interesting. Like what can we do with that?
Yeah,
I'll tell you what I did with it, with my mind whirling, but go ahead. I want to hear what you think.
yeah, I want to hear what your take is as well. But I think it gets back to the question of, does silence have a sound?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, for those who have a mindfulness practice, I think that sometimes silence is, mindfulness is so equated with silence. And I remember that when I first started meditating about 15 years ago, I had a chavruta, a study partner in meditation. And I remember checking in with him that I decided every week I would take on a different type of mindfulness practice as like a bit of a laboratory. And one week I decided that I would meditate on my way to work. And so, and particularly when I would walk from my house to the subway station. And I remember doing a meditation, and then I kept turning around because I kept hearing somebody walking behind me. And then I realized that actually it was the sound of my own footsteps, which sounds like this kind of cheesy story, but it was actually true. And it was this realization that, like, when you really can shut down the inner chatter of our minds that are constantly having us, replaying things that maybe have happened in the past, or thinking about things that might happen in the future, and that when we're actually present in the moment, we can hear all these sounds that our mind chatter blocks out. And so the ability to pick up on these faint sounds all around us is really a sign of being present in the moment. And so I think that maybe one could say on a more mystical level that the sound of the aleph is the sound of the present moment.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember where Viva Zornberg gets the phrase of murmuring of the deep, but one of her books. Anyway, I guess what I was cogitating on as I was trying to quiet my own mind instead of trying to think, what is that? What can you do with that? As I was sitting, it was comforting for me because it helped me kind of think of discerning this divine presence in a little bit of the hum or buzz of the mind that I could hear that teaching and I think, okay, what I'm aiming for is total stillness, total silence. And then I try to think about, well, what's the most silent place I've ever been, where there's no sound. And it's probably doesn't, I don't even know if that exists. I don't even know if it exists in space. But there's a kind of discerning of this, since it's combined with a call, that there's something that is slightly audible in a way. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? It could be the sound of our own footsteps, like you said, but that there's something to be heard. And I guess that's where I went with that. So, which was a new thing for me. So I really appreciated that. I wanted to invite you to talk a little bit, and just maybe this is a nice little preview for your conversation with Ezra Klein about Shabbat. What you said, you started off by mentioning that, you thought, well, probably a lot of people here might be interested in this, right? Have special interest in Shabbat, because we sometimes think about this daily practice and as a kind of Shabbat practice, and infusing the rest of the day with Shabbat consciousness, as you were just describing. Do you see a relationship between this idea of that small aleph and Shabbat, and as a time or a kind of a mode of being conducive to that kind of hearing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, Shabbat to me is about mindfulness, right? I observe a pretty traditional Shabbat in which I don't use any electronics. And it's really one of the few times during the week where I can actually be fully present in the moment, where I don't have this distraction machine whirling in my pocket or on my desk. And the opportunity to know that where I am right now is exactly where I'm supposed to be, and that I don't need to, that my mind doesn't need to be elsewhere. It can be present in the moment. And the mystics, they teach about this concept that this, when in sort of the messianic times, or the arrival of liberatory consciousness, they describe as Yom Shekula Shabbos,
Mm-hmm.
that like that every day will be Shabbat. And to me, that speaks to like our liberation lies or in our ability to really be present in the moment, to know that the 6 days of working and achieving and accomplishing and amassing, that all those things that we are looking for, like the hole that maybe we feel in our heart, the thing that we think we need in order to be complete, or that we need to be worthy as human beings, Shabbat is the invitation to say, that thing that you're looking for out in the world, actually, it's already inside of us.
Mm-hmm.
You think that thing that is going to complete you, that accomplishment or that achievement that's going to make you valuable or worthy, actually, that it's already inside of you. And so I think that there is this sense of stillness that can arrive when we have that sense of completion. And so I think that therein lies the ability that when we can actually slow down and put down all of the doing, we can actually hear that still small voice of the aleph, that whisper of the divine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So speaking of the whisper, so Mike McQuillan is asking here a good question. The still small voice and cosmic whisper. maybe that kind of pregnant sound that Shalom was speaking about, are touching metaphors, the divine in their simplicity, but while wishing God would exert God's power through us against the rampant corruption and greed of this time. I wonder whether a stronger phrase might move individuals to exert compassion. I think might be compassionate action on our collective behalf. Raises an interesting question about like why does the divine have to be so subtle, you know? And it's interesting. I like with a still small voice phrase that called the Madaka comes from that passage where Elijah is running away, right, and goes to Sinai, and there is a lot of noise. There's a whirlwind and an earthquake and fire and thunder, and the divine is not in the loudness, right, in the noise of the world, but in that stillness that follows the noise and the calm that follows the storm. I don't know. Any thoughts about that? Maybe God should speak. Maybe God needs to speak up a little more.
Well, if you look at some of the mystics' interpretation of this, they say that, specifically the voice is faint because it's an invitation,
Mm-hmm.
right? That God is actually not doing the work for us, but inviting us into the work. And that's why I love this conception of this formulation of Shalom's formulation of the pregnant aleph, which is that it's the sound that you make before you speak, but it's not an ends unto itself. It's like when I've given this teaching in person, I ask people, say, like, what is the sound of aleph? And it's like, it's like like you're about to speak. And so it necessarily precedes the action of speaking. Like it's not an ends unto itself. And that's why I really love Mike's question, is that I think that if you think about the Rimanover Rebbe's teaching about Sinai, that Sinai was just like the sort of beginning of the formulation of the word. And so it's thus an invitation for us to complete the sentence, right? That there's a still small voice that speaks to us, that is meant to manifest us into that is meant to give us our calling, that is meant to inspire us into action. It's not, the aleph is not silence, right? We need silence in order to hear the aleph, but the aleph is the beginning of action, the beginning of manifesting, the beginning of speaking into the world. And the mystics say that the aleph contains every other letter of the alphabet nested within it. And so it's sort of the beginning of creation. And so I would agree with Mike that it's not just a quietist, let's sit on a hilltop and meditate, but actually we need to hear the aleph as an invitation to complete that act of revelation.
Yeah, well, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Last question before we close. In terms of the English, do you experience a distinction between silence and stillness?
I think that I think that stillness is probably closer to what we've been talking about here today, because silence implies a vacuum, a lack
Mm-hmm.
of anything, and stillness implies, like grounding, so that we can in fact hear that there is
Mm-hmm.
something there. And I think about there's a line in a section in the Talmud where the rabbis are debating debating all the different ways in which we serve the divine and praise the divine and try to connect with the divine, and which one is the best. And so there's this big debate, and they talk about prayer and about singing and about offering sacrifices, and also all the different rituals in the temple. And there's one line that kind of ends the debate, which is shtika ole al hakol, that silence is greater than all of those things. And so I think that perhaps stillness might be better, a way to translate that, in terms of how do we create, instead of us offering things to the divine, how do we actually ground ourselves and create that space of stillness so that we can actually hear what the divine has to tell us? And it's no coincidence that perhaps the hallmark prayer of Jewish tradition is the Shema, which is the injunction of listen. It's an invitation for us to listen, and that is the way in which we can connect most deeply to the divine.
Mm. Well, I'm enjoying this very much. I wish we could continue, but we hopefully another point down the road. Zvika, I want to thank you so much for this beautiful teaching and opportunity for us to sit together in the midst of our day. And I know, when you're in a position like you are, it's not easy to carve out the time for this. So really, very much a lot of appreciation to you for it, and Kat for holding our space, and all of you for being here. I put the link again in the chat for this upcoming event at Chochmat Alev. Really, it's a beautiful community. I know number of members of the community have been part at different times of this particular community or practice, as well as our colleague at IJS, Rebecca Schisler. And it's just really an honor to have you. Glad to be here with you all. And we hope to see you all tomorrow for practice with Rabbi Deborah Ornstein, everyone. Many blessings.
Blessings to all of you on your day.